Hi, in this video I would like to respond to 4 statements that some of my friends and family made during my recent visit to Israel, because my impression is that those statements represent what might be pervasive opinions in Israel. The first out of 4 statements was, if you can't tolerate anti-Semitism outside of Israel, come live here. There is no anti-Semitism here. From an Israeli perspective, this statement is somewhat correct, because in spite of being a Jewish state, Israel has one of the most diverse populations in the world and a true equality of democratic coexistence. You can find people from different religions, ethnicities, and persuasions in government, hospitals, universities, corporations, and otherwise all walks of life. Yet, Israel and Jewish Israelis are target for anti-Semitism in Israel and around the world. In case you don't know, anti-Semitism is hatred of Jews with no association with the Semitic ethnicity. The anti-Semitic objection to Israel is that the Jews are not supposed to be independent in their own sovereign state. There are currently missiles aimed at Israel from Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza as part of the jihad intention to turn Israel into a Muslim country. There are ongoing loud demonstrations against Israel in many cities in the world. There are anti-Semitic women in the United States Congress often requesting to impose sanctions on Israel from the congressional podium. Al Jazeera, an anti-Semitic news broadcasting, is shouting wolf to the world about Israel. Muslim children in Israel learn to hate Israel from textbooks, chants, art projects, and military training. There are Muslim mothers in Israel who cherish the jihad ideology more than their children and are set to sacrifice their own children for the jihadi cause of eliminating Israel. There are Israeli Muslim children proudly wearing M16 image expressing their ambition to obliterate Israel. There are Muslim terrorists from Judea and Samaria shooting, stabbing, and kidnapping Israeli citizens, to include children, and so on, and so on. If this is not anti-Semitism, then what is it? The second of the 4 statements asserted that it's impossible for people like me to know what is happening in Israel from afar, and that it is presumptuous for people like me to believe that we do. This statement is also somewhat correct, because people outside Israel live in an anti-Semitic echo chamber. We are bombarded with lies about Israel, consistently hearing terms such as brutality, occupation, apartheid, human rights violations, and breaking international laws based on lies, exaggerations, and logical manipulations. In addition, anti-Semitic Muslims in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza choreograph clashes with Israeli military and courts, and then publish them on global media as if they were real events. And furthermore, Israeli mindful retaliation to violent provocations is often described as sheer brutality or murder in cold blood. I receive news notifications from Israel on my phone directly as they happen from 5 Israeli news sources, to include siren alerts, often prompting Israeli citizens to run to their shelters. I watch other Israeli news that are posted online, as well as news from other countries, in order to be aware of all perspectives, lies and all. It is very possible that I am quite well informed from afar. A counterclaim I would like to make to my Israeli friends and family is that Israel doesn't generate nearly enough news in English about the truth in order to counter the anti-Semitic lies shouted from high towers. The too few responses generated by Israeli officials are usually in Hebrew on Israeli media whispered into a well. Israel is even more guilty of not generating daily official press releases to the world. As a result, Israel is currently losing the public relations war in the world by default. The third out of four statements was that the BDS is finished, that their loss of the Ben and Jerry boycott battle demonstrated that the BDS is too weak to continue harassing Israel and Israelis. In case you don't know, the BDS is an anti-Semitic organization funded primarily by Qatar through the Palestinian Council, with the intent to pressure corporations around the world to stop doing business with Israel and to persuade people around the world not to buy products made in Israel. Their mission states that they advocate for human rights of the so-called Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. But in reality, they actually hurt those people because every time a corporation in Judea and Samaria closes down a factory, those people that the BDS claim to protect lose their livelihood, while the factory owner simply moves the factory to another location and contracts another corporation. But this is not the entire scope of the BDS hatred of the Jews. For quite a while, it has been successfully producing anti-Israel demonstrations in streets of large cities and on university campuses. They also invite anti-Semitic professors to lecture to university students against Israel. In addition, and gravely concerning, the BDS has been successfully advocating in favor of including anti-Israel material into children's textbooks in public schools in the United States, and on the same token, for omitting the Jewish experience as irrelevant. There is currently no indication that the BDS is slowing down anytime soon. The fourth out of four statements is that the Hudaybiyah event occurred too long ago to have any effect on the current Jewish-Muslim relationship, and that this poor relationship is directly the result of the chaos in the Israeli government that currently can't manage Muslim extremists in Israel. It is somewhat correct the Jewish-Muslim relationship is currently unstable. Governments of Muslim countries in the Middle East that have business relationship with Israel experience much pressure from their own citizens to break up the ties with Israel because for them, hatred of Jews takes priority. This hatred derives originally from the Hudaybiyah narrative. In the event that you don't know, the Hudaybiyah event took place with the establishment of Islam in the 1600s of the Common Era. In short, residents of Hudaybiyah were Jews who were slaughtered due to the refusal to convert to Islam. It was the event that initiated the hatred toward Jews in the same manner that the unsubstantiated story of Jews killing the Son of God was initiated by the Christians. The stories are different, but turning the stubborn Jews into eternal enemies for refusing to convert remains the same. In both cases, Jew hating became a religious tradition that still persists today. Today, the hatred comes first and the excuses for it later. Current anti-Semitic influencers often remind their followers the Hudaybiyah event as a model for how to feel about the Jews and how the Jews must convert or die at any cost, to include suspending one's own moral judgment. Through civilized history, there were times when Muslim conquerors let the Jews live as Jews for the purpose of taxing them very heavily. In such cases, Jews were heavily marginalized and humiliated. For example, they were required to hand over their Jewish texts while prostrating on the ground. Next to many prohibitions, Jews were also required to wear garment articles that announced their non-Muslim religion from a distance, and Muslims were allowed and encouraged to harass and torment them. If you believe that the Hudaybiyah hatred doesn't have any effect on the Jewish-Muslim relationship today, consider the president of the Palestinian Authority in Israel, who recently said hatefully, "We don't want the Jews to defile Muslim land with their filthy feet." Or consider the representatives of the nonsensical Free Palestine movement, who was recently asked, "What would you do with the Jews if you turn Israel into a Muslim country?" In the Hudaybiyah tradition, they replied, "The Jews will have to convert, be heavily taxed, or die." What I would like you to take from this video is that Muslim anti-Semitism is just as bad as Christian anti-Semitism, that the term anti-Semitism has nothing to do with Jews being Semitic, and that it is based on a religious tradition of hatred that, although started a long time ago, still persists today. If you didn't know, now you know. Bye.